Hey guys, it's Ian from SS8000 Cars on a very early Monday morning. Now today is incredibly exciting. We've had some great days, but today we're going to do the comparison between the 458 Speciale and our new car, which is the 675 LT McLaren. Now, some of you might say, well, that's not fair, because the 675 LT is a slightly different generation to the 458 Speciale, because of course, as you know, we're on to the 488 now. But I think it is relevant because both these cars are track focused. So the standard car in this case was the 458, and the standard car in the case of the 675 LT, of course, is the 650S. So I think there is a relevance. Now, of course, the 650S was introduced into the McLaren range to replace the MP412C. Now, the MP412C was the first generation of McLaren's Super Series cars, whereas the 650S got introduced when the 458 Speciale had already been out. So the 675 LT, which is the race version of the 650S, came out quite a number of years after the Speciale. Now the Speciale is the race version of the 458. Now you're tempted to say, actually it's a sports version, but I really feel the 458 is a sports car, and more sporty cars are hard to find. So therefore, you can't just say this is the sports version in the range, it is the race version. And as you're probably aware, Ferrari have done this with their V8 engine cars through time. So with the 360, you have the 360 Stradale, Challenge Stradale. With the 430, you had the 430 Scuderia. And they were all racing versions of the original platform. And the same is true with the Speciale. Now, the Speciale has been honed to a specifically fine level because it's got the racing suspension, it's got active aerodynamics, it's got the braking system from the LaFerrari, it's got scopes and air inlets all over the place, all of which we'll touch on. And it's a car that really is meant for the track. It's even wearing track tyres. So it's an absolutely wonderful machine, and one of its greatest assets is the fact that it's a naturally aspirated V8 engine. So there's no forced induction here, there's no lag when you put your foot down on the accelerator. It goes from 0 to 9,250 revs in an instant, no lag. Obviously you have to be a little bit careful of what the rear tyres are doing and the conditions on the road, but if you have a day like I think we're going to have today, absolutely fantastic, and you will get some spinning in each gear, but you can keep your foot fairly close to the metal. And one of the things that they have refined, which I'm not actually sure I've mentioned before in the videos on the Speciale, is they've refined the gear changes in this to such a point, you put your foot down and just whack the gear shift through, and it'll just go bang, 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 bang as it goes through from first to seventh gear. It's a double clutch sequential system, and probably as fine honed as it needs to be. Guys, you can see that we brought the McLaren down, and I have to say I think it looks rather stonking sitting in the drive. A real supercar, and although we've not had the chance to drive it particularly fast at the moment, you have to say the potential is enormous, and I'd say it's in another performance league to the Speciale, and I think that is going to be the biggest significant difference between the two cars. Now, McLaren, of course, back in the 80s and 90s, they used to race at Le Mans, and they used to race the F1 at Le Mans. And basically the F1, apparently according to legendary drivers of that time, was a little bit unstable because it had quite a short wheelbase. So they produced the long tail version of the F1. Now, the F1 and the long tail version, I think there was a significant difference in length of car. If you put the two side by side, the long tail version looks about 2 or 3 feet longer. The 675 bears the name long tail, but actually it's only about 3 centimeters longer than the 650S. But outside that, that is where the 675 came from. Now the 675 is a limited edition, so 500 cars plus a number of test cars. And as a consequence of that, it's going to be a fairly rare sight. Now my understanding is the Speciale, they built over 2,000 of them. So they're going to be a rarer sight than the Speciale. So as you can see, really, this is a very, very aggressive machine. And this machine, again, is fairly focused for the track, especially this one, because this one has the full Club Sport package, okay, which includes the titanium roll bar, the fire extinguisher, and the racing seat harnesses. So absolutely tailored for the track, and it really is a beautifully engineered machine. And I think that's one of the things that I absolutely love about McLaren. They are engineering excellence. Everything has been fine honed in this car, and it feels it when you drive. As you probably know, this car has forced induction. So it's a 3.8 V8 twin turbocharged engine. I have to say, because it's so powerful, produces 675 HP, I have to say you really don't notice the force induction. But then I haven't had too much time at the wheel of the car yet. I'd be very surprised if there wasn't some lag. As you can see, this car is clothed in mainly aluminium with carbon fibre parts. So if I go round the car, the bonnet is aluminium, the wings are carbon fibre, the roof is carbon fibre, the doors are aluminium, the rear wings are aluminium. So there's quite a high aluminium content. In the 675LT, much more carbon fibre, both in terms of what you see on the outside and in terms of what's being used under the skin. Now, possibly the biggest difference is the fact that the McLaren uses a carbon tub. Now, as we've already covered on the Speciale, all cars rely on a fair amount of carbon fibre and alloys to keep the weight down, and the McLaren is no exception to this. We've basically got the same basic structure as the Ferrari, with one very important exception. And what I want to show you is, we'll talk about the doors a little bit later on, although I do think they look fantastic. They're much more supercar orientated, I think, any of the Lamborghinis of old. The doors always open straight up. But what I want to talk about today is the carbon tub. And this is the McLaren, you can see the McLaren branded carbon tub. It makes it a little bit more difficult to get in, no question, especially with the racing stroke bucket seats. But all supercars at the very high end have carbon tubs. And I've always thought there's a reason for this, and the reason is they are the most rigid structures you can use for your driving environment in a car. There's absolutely no flex in this car, and from what I understand on the 650S, which obviously has the 650S Spider, taking the roof off has made no difference to that car in terms of rigidity, simply because of the carbon tub. The Ferrari doesn't have the carbon tub, as I pointed out. The McLaren does. Now, as I'll chat about a little later, push that down and the window goes up. What you find in the McLaren is a single-minded purpose in building the cars. Now, even the smaller McLarens that have been introduced, so the 570S and the 570 GT, and recently introduced, which I didn't mention, the 540 S, the reality is they're still using carbon tubs. So McLaren have obviously nailed their mast to producing the most rigid supercars available, and of course the carbon tub contributes to the lightness of the car. Now, the McLaren is 1230 kgs without fuels and oils, which is an astonishing achievement. I mean, you're heading down towards the tiny little Lotuses that are produced at that level. The Ferrari a little heavier, slightly above 1300 kilograms without fuels, and that is partly down to the carbon tub. But again, they've used as many carbon fibre parts in here as possible. Obviously the wings are carbon fibre, the bonnet is carbon fibre, the roof is carbon fibre. I'd say the doors were carbon fibre actually, and the rear wings are carbon fibre. That's interesting actually. There's more carbon fibre in this car than I actually thought, and certainly more than you get in the Speciale. And then they've used lots of accoutrements around the car, which you can see: the sills, the front spoiler and splitters, the side sills, and the rear bumper components are all carbon fibre. And even the titanium roll bar only adds 4 kilograms more to the car's weight. Just a phenomenal achievement. The Ferrari uses the LaFerrari brakes. Now, at this point in time, I've not had the chance to brake from speed in the McLaren, whereas of course this car's been on the circuit, so therefore I know these brakes are as good as they come. I'm hoping the McLaren's brakes will be as good. The Speciale makes use of its aerodynamics, so it has active aerodynamics at the front. It has the ability to channel, so if you come round, you've got, when these open, it pushes the air across the front here, so actually stalls the air that would normally come in for cooling and channels the air all the way around the car, where the fins capture a large amount of the air coming through here and on this side of the wheels. That provides stability at speed, and that comes into being at about 112 miles an hour. Then this car also has side slip angle control, which is part of the electronics available to make sure you don't lose the car when you're pushing it out of a corner. So it'll allow some slippage, allow the car to go slightly sideways but still control it. Now that makes you look like a racing driver, and I like that, and Ferrari have really honed these technical capabilities into their cars, because they recognise that the vast majority of Ferrari drivers want a car that's quick, but they don't have the control that a semi-racing driver would have. Guys, we're talking about the brakes and the general aerodynamics of the car. Ferrari and McLaren have a slightly different approach. Obviously, they're using scoops and coolants to cool the engine down. They've got primary heat exchangers behind the big scoop here, and then there's secondary cooling points behind the window, which I mentioned, but also down here, actually integrated into the sill. But McLaren have an immense amount of racing heritage as well, of course, but they don't rely so much on active aerodynamics. What McLaren's approach has tended to be is to use an active aero brake, and the air brake has the capability to come up and down depending on whether the car senses that it needs additional downforce, or in fact, as I mentioned earlier, braking. Now I've put the air brake up to demonstrate the position that it comes up to at speed, because this then provides considerably more downforce for the car, so it keeps it planted to the road. However, it's got the ability also to come right out, because it's on hydraulics. It has the ability to come up this high and move completely vertical to add to braking when you're braking from heavy speeds. Now, I haven't had the opportunity yet to try that out. I can't tell you how effective it is, but the logic suggests that it'd be fairly effective. And again, I haven't had the opportunity to try the brakes out. I think there was a heavy involvement in the brake technology on the 675LT, which has been borrowed from the P1. But again, I've not experienced them to be able to tell you just how effective they are. They seem very good, and they're certainly nice and progressive. Moving to the inside of the car, you can see that it's very driver focused. I mean, we've covered this in the last couple of weeks, so I won't spend too much time on this now. But basically, we have the carbon fibre racing seats. The driving position in this is absolutely phenomenal. I have commented before on the disadvantages of a left-hand drive car, but it doesn't affect the driving capabilities of the car. So the car is absolutely set up to be driven fast, either on the road or on a circuit. And all the controls are within reach. Now, as I have mentioned before, we have the full racing harness, so that's perfect for the track. And actually, in this particular car, not a particularly big disadvantage when you're driving it on the road. First thing you'll notice, as I did show you before, is the dihedral doors. That's the angle at which they open. And I think personally, if I just get out of the way, that really lends a particularly sporting nature to any supercar stroke hypercar. La Ferrari and the P1 both open that way, although the 918 doesn't, I don't think. I think it's standard doors. Okay, so once you get over the quite high sill of the carbon tub, you can see it's a very focused driver's environment, but not quite as stripped out as the Speciale, because basically in the Speciale we merely had aluminium floors. Now here everything's clothed in carbon fibre because it's essentially a carbon fibre tub. So basically you can see central to the driving environment are the bucket race seats, and I have never ever sat in a pair of seats that are so comfortable and hold you in all the right places when you're driving. Now, you can't actually, basically because the backs on the seats are fixed, you can't adjust the backs in any way. You can go forward and back, or you can rake the seats slightly, although raking the seats has to be done by the garage. It can't be done by you because it requires specialist tools. And basically what that means is the seats are slightly further back, raked back, than I would normally have them, but they're very comfortable. And I was going to have them changed, but I've decided against that at the moment. Now again, we'll talk about the inside in much more detail in a video to come out a little bit later on. But what I want to do is, if I can get you to come over, what I want to just show you is the titanium roll bar, which is a thing of beauty in its own right. So you can see here that it's been integrated and it's attached to the carbon tub absolutely perfectly. And you can also see that I've rolled around the bottom of the roll bar the 4-point racing harness. So it's Ian at SS8000 Cars, signing off for the moment, but we'll be back with another video. Please make sure you subscribe.